Equations with two absolute values. If we have an equation of this form where we have an absolute value on both sides of the equation, then we're going to set up two equations just like we did in the absolute value equals a positive number example. But this time we're going to have one equation be just without the absolute value and the other be without the absolute value but also with a minus sign on one side of the equation. It doesn't really matter which side to put it on, but it's more common to put it on the right-hand side. So that means we would set up our two equations, one of them, x plus 5 equals 3x plus 7, just without the absolute value, and the other one, x plus 5 equals minus, and in parentheses, the entire right-hand side of this equation. The parentheses are very important because we do have to distribute that sign into both terms on the right-hand side. So we can now solve both of these equations individually to get x plus 5 equals minus 3x minus 7, and then get all our x terms on one side. And get all our numeric terms on one side. To get 4x equals negative 12, and dividing both sides by 4 gets us x equals negative 3. Now we come over to the first equation and solve it as well. I'm going to choose to move my x's over to the right this time so that I'll have a positive coefficient. That's going to be 2x, and I'll then move this 7 over to the left to get it away from the x, so that on the left-hand side I have negative 2, divide both sides by 2 to get x equals negative 1. So that my solution set in roster notation would be negative 1 and negative 3 in any order. A quick check is often helpful at the end of any equation. So if I'm going to check my solutions to an absolute value equation, just like with any equation, I go back to the original equation. I don't check it on these two equations that I set up. So here I've plugged in negative 1 for x, and that gives me absolute value of 4 equals absolute value of 4, which is true because 4 equals 4. Plugging in negative 3 for x gives me the absolute value of 2 equals the absolute value of negative 2, which is also true because when I take the absolute values of both sides, I do in fact get the same number. Going on to the next one, we're going to set this up in the same way. This is going to come out a little bit differently this time. We start with 4 minus 2x equals 2x minus 1, just the exact same equation but without the absolute value. And our second equation would be 4 minus 2x equals minus parentheses 2x minus 1. Remember, it's very important to remember those parentheses so that we change all of the signs on one side of the equation. So again, let's just start with the second one because we're thinking about it right now. 4 minus 2x equals minus 2x plus 1. And then we gather the x terms together on the same side of the equation by adding 2x to both sides. And we can see that what happens here is that the two x's actually cancel out and drop out of the whole equation, so that what we have is 4 equals 1. This is a contradiction. We saw these in linear equations. And as soon as we reach this contradiction, we stop and we know that this particular equation gives us no solution. This doesn't mean that the original equation has no solution. It means that this particular equation, one out of the two, has no solution. We can still get a solution out of the other one possibly, so we should keep going. I'm going to start by moving the x terms over to the right by adding 2x to both sides. And then I'll move this 1 over to the left by adding 1 to both sides. So this gives me 5 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 5/4. My final answer, and it's really important to know exactly how to express my final answer. My final answer is just the one solution that I got from the equation that gave me a solution. I should not have in my final answer 5/4 and no solution. no solution really only applies to this equation here on the right. It does not apply to the original equation because the original equation did actually get us one solution. So very important, my final answer is just the number 5/4.